Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Man Who Watched podcast. This is a long-form spoiler cast, made as an audio extension of the Man Who Watched Batman book series and soon-to-be audio book series, where this time around, I'm bringing on a co-host, and we're going to be discussing episode by episode all the way through one of my favorite modern DC animated shows, Young Justice. So, to kick things off, introducing myself, my name is Ken Johnson. I am a comic book writer and a review novel writer, mostly focused in writing my book series, The Man Who Watched Batman, which is an episode-by-episode analysis book, working its way all the way through in excruciating detail the 1990s Batman, the animated series, and eventually through the entirety of the Timverse books. Join me is my co-host, Travis.
And I'm the person he drags along when he can't find anyone else.
Okay. To be fair, Travis has co-hosted on quite a few different podcasts with me in the past. And as far as, I don't want to say casual, that's not really fair, but, if, your average big comic book fan kind of people, he knows his storytelling, he knows his shows, and he has got a lot of experience working as a devil's advocate to me, so that'll make some good content. I'm very glad to have him on this show with me, so.
Okay.
So, without further ado, we're going to start with our first episode of this podcast, and our first show, which is Young Justice. Now, the reason we picked Young Justice is because, in recent memory, this is by far one of the best superhero shows I've seen, in the way that it handles character, the way that it takes both characters that you're normally familiar with and not familiar with in DC Comics and that kind of thing, and interprets them in ways that are extremely new and helps you really understand these characters in a better light. It's action-packed, the animation is fantastic, and it is a show that is very overlooked by a lot of people, and nothing would make me happier than to create something that would encourage more people to go out and watch this show and get the most out of this show.
Show has a big cult following behind it.
Yes.
Which it obviously deserves. But this show really does a lot of things well. A lot of things well that a lot of shows don't get as much. Mm-hmm. And it's just basic things that you wouldn't think are like big things, but when you see them done really well, really work.
Absolutely. And a lot of that is stuff that this show is the ultimate example of, hey, you know that one thing that like every show does that's like super annoying and you hate it when they do it? This is the show that goes, well, we're not going to do that thing. We're going to like make a point to make sure that you notice that we didn't do that thing. And on top of that, we're going to do a better thing. Or vice versa. Like you watch a show and you go, for the love of God, why didn't they just do this? And this is the show goes, okay, let's do that then. Let's see how that, thing works out. A lot of those kinds of things. The show breaks a lot of those normal cliches of these kind of shows in both its format and its execution. So, starting that off, we start with our first episode, which, for the life of me, I cannot remember the name of, but you might as well just call it Today is the Day, because it's pretty much the theme of this whole episode.
First episode, you can't really. Anyway,
I'll cut it back in later. It's fine.
No, it's all good.
No, it's all good. We're rolling with it. Okay, so episode 1, Today is the Day, as it will now be called. The episode begins with an introduction of our characters, and the first thing you realize about this show is the opening of the first thing that you see perfectly puts in line the attitude that the show is going to have. Mr. Freeze, and his new cool, more beefier design is going out, and he's freezing everybody, and it's like, oh, Batman has arrived, and Batman, and I'll fight with Batman. And then Robin shows up, and he goes, oh, it's you. What, is Batman too busy to deal with me, or so on and so forth? And Robin kind of shrugging it off in his normal way. But that little nonchalant line is like the tone of this entire show. This is not a show about the Justice League. This is a show about the sidekicks. This is the show about the B team, or debatably even the C team. of the Justice League and taking these characters that are usually the bane of comic book writers and making them the focus. So after, a decent introduction of those characters, we're immediately struck with all of the other characters that we have, each of which fighting, look, another Freeze villain and another Freeze villain. And on one point, it's kind of like, look, DC's got all these villains that do exactly the same thing. But it's also like, it does make you notice, this is kind of a strange coincidence, isn't it?
Yes, and then you almost right after that, you get a line where the Justice League are treating this completely like a normal thing, like 4 ice villains in the same row.
The same day,
this isn't
something's gotta be going on here.
Coincidence. And they're not like, oh, ice villains, haha. They're just like, they're treating this like adults would.
Absolutely.
Which is something for the show, because most other shows would just make silly ice puns.
Like they'd be like, look, another ice villain, and there'd be another freeze pun. Like there's not the whole 4 ice villains in a row, not a single freeze pun or an ice to be. Okay, there's a glass jaw joke. That's not even.
Anyway.
Is there a freeze pun?
Anyway, not the point.
Anyway,
but the thing is, they don't focus on it because villains. It's just literally just 30 seconds with two important characters.
Yes.
And it's just like, here's this character, how he's react to this situation that they don't talk about, and here's his reaction to it. And how it's different. It's just slightly. They're all doing the exact same thing, defeating the villain really quickly, and moving on. But they all act just enough that you're like, okay, I totally understand this character. Enough for a pilot episode.
Immediately in this opening sequence, this is still in the cold open of the show, you get a complete look at what the character dynamics of all these characters are going to be. Robin portrayed as you normally imagine, most if not all of the skills and the knowledge of Batman, but he's still he's a young teenage kid, so he's just as arrogant with that information, unlike how Batman would be. Aqualad is a little bit on the older side. He's a lot more mature. He's a lot more down to earth. He is focused on the mission. He's absolutely the responsible one.
But as soon as that's done, he's like, yes, I am excited.
Yes. He's excited till the job is done, but he's not emotionless. He's not cold. He's just, he's very understanding of the stakes and how everything needs to be done. Kid Flash is, he's a smaller version of the Flash. He's, he's hyperactive. He's impatient. He's, he's quick to rush into things. Like that is, that is his personality trait with his powers. And then Speedy, who is a little bit more difficult to read, but you get the sense, once again, he is on the older side compared to the other ones. He's very impatient, but more in a way of how he doesn't feel like certain things are worth his time, more than anything. He's just ready to get things done. He's not taking things seriously. He's just like, this guy better not get in the way of, of the day, because today is the day.
And they keep using that line, which does slightly get a little...
I'm keeping a counter between the 2 episodes of how many times we hear today is the day. At least for episode 1, we've got 5 in 22 minutes, but there's some more in episode 2, don't worry.
It does feel a little weird, especially since we watched this a couple times. Because we talked about this in the other podcast we do. But it still works. It doesn't feel like really hard in anyway. Minor nitpick in the first episode. But the pilot really works as a pilot.
Yes.
Where it just, here's what we're doing. Here's these characters. But it doesn't suffer from what most like pilot syndrome.
Yes.
Because you still get all the story from an episode.
Yes.
It's just focusing on
There's never a sequence in this episode of, hello, my name is Aqualad. These are my powers, and this is my backstory. Like, they never do any of that crap.
Trust, and it kind of assumes a little bit that you have some knowledge of it.
Yes.
Like, you should know who the character. But if you don't, which I didn't know really... I'm not a huge comic book person.
Yeah.
So I didn't... I obviously know Robin.
Mm-hmm.
I know Flash, because he's just...
The Flash.
He's just young Flash, which... works, but like I really didn't know a lot about Aqualad or.
Well, even this version of Aqualad is extremely different than most of the versions people are familiar with.
This version, and like I never cared about Green Lantern or Speedy, but this one made it actually did well.
Yeah.
Just in the few episodes, and it's just. Yeah. It's just like, we're not sitting around, we're moving along, and you're coming with us. Yes. Or you're behind.
They set up a lot of that subtle stuff you need to know from the beginning. One of the more subtle things that, like, as far as, like, how they establish how this is, like, a different Aqualad, is, I mean, although it doesn't completely knock the idea out of the point, like, it does put you in because of the fact that they set up from the beginning that Aquaman is black, and specifically that he keeps referring to him as my liege rather than anything else, it does kind of inform you, and they confirm it later on, this is not, in fact, the traditional Aqualad, which is directly the son of Aquaman. And, in fact, they even show up later, and they confirm clearly for people that don't know, that Speedy is also not the son of Green Arrow. Because, for the ones that you don't know, a lot of casual audience members would it seems to be a comfortable assumption, but they wanted to clarify that that's not actually the case. Yeah. So when we get past the cold open and everyone's put together, their big day is that they believe that they're finally entering their first big steps to become like official members of the Justice League, and they go down to the Justice League headquarters, and they walk inside, and there's lines of like tourists inside wearing like Batman and Superman t-shirts. But something I've always liked in these shows is when like they actually like acknowledge, like in a world where superheroes really do exist, that like people like have their favorites, and they have like this, this stuff. Like there's even a really funny like comic book nerd joke on the side when they're like, "Hey, look, it's Speedy." No, that's Kid Flash. Speedy is Green Arrow's sidekick. Well, that's just stupid. Like,
yeah.
That one was a little lame, but most of them they do in the show where, they acknowledge a lot of the, the fanboy kind of like, rib poking stuff that's in the show. But the cool thing is when they finally get down there and they're showing off the Justice League, whatever. And like you mentioned, when they're like, hey, there's 4 ice villains attacking all at the same time. Immediately before they even start with the animosity of the scene, just the framing of it is all the members of the Justice League standing there as all the rest of them are looking at him, and then directly in top of them is the very clear Justice League members only sign. And just the framing of that shot before anyone mentions any animosity, like, confirms that you're like, okay, so this is where this is good, like, this is the divide. This is a shot where you're looking POV as, the Young Justice at the Justice League, Justice League only. Like, this is them, this is us, before anyone acknowledges that it's a problem. And then Speedy immediately acknowledges, like, what you would assume he would acknowledge is, like, this is not what we were promised. Like, this isn't the real Justice League hit. Like, you're finally entering the Justice League. Not many people get this opportunity. Oh, really? And it's a big glass ceiling, and all the tourists are looking in and snapping pictures.
Yeah, like, that was good. It mildly, like, okay, I like that they're like, no, this is just the first step. Like, this isn't, they're being really adult about this because they're adults, and the young teenager who's being a brash teenager. But, like, Speedy almost immediately starts having a problem with this, and is just like, no, this is not what we promised, and almost immediately storms out and quits.
Yes.
Which, it's a minor annoyance, which I'll get to later because it doesn't happen now, but like, that's your first thing you see of him is the first major scene of him. The first
major personality driven.
And he clashes with literally everyone in the scene.
Yes.
And just storms out, and that's all you see him of this episode.
Yes.
That comes back later.
But it does bring kind of an interesting idea of, like, wondering, like, if he's so established at the beginning, like, what does this actually mean for his, like, purpose in the series if he is, so immediately, like, discast from the others?
Yes. And I'll do more than that later. But, yeah, right. So he storms out, and other people then they explain, no, this is just a thing, and we have bigger stuff to deal with. Like,
right.
They're not really ignoring them, but they are. And they do a good job where, like, kids, you aren't important right now. And
there's a lot of the wording of how they go through the scene that's really interesting and how they set up. For one thing, I like the fact that when they're fighting against Speedy, it's not just a mentor versus mentor clash. Like, it's specifically Aquaman who enters, from outside of the argument to say, like, this is not your fight. Like, this is not, the time or place for this. And that's when we get the line where he, stands up in front of the entire Justice League, and he tells the rest of them that he knows that the actual, the actual headquarters is in fact Watchtower, which is the satellite up in space, which is also very good. Like early on, like, hey, making sure we're clear that this is in fact a Justice League that has a Watchtower. For comic book fans, that is a good thing to know right off the bat. But what works is so well is that, like, this far in the episode, Batman still hasn't said anything. Like, he has said something at this point.
Like, he's like 2 lines.
Yeah, talking to everybody else, but then immediately he kind of looks around to be like, okay, now who told him? And then Green Arrow obviously confesses, like, oh, come on, can't we just make an exception this one time? And he just, only his eyes move. He just goes from, like, he just tilts his eyes a little bit to just be like, no, we can't. And he just goes, okay then. Like, it's, it immediately establishes Batman, not for just, because of Batman, but, like, his presence as, like, an intimidating, authoritative figure is, like, right off the bat.
It clearly establishes his role without doing about it, and again, that's what this show does really well. It trusts you're not an idiot. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, no going on. It's just, eye expression slightly squintier.
Yes.
And you're just like, oh, even Green Lantern, Green Arrow, who is exactly the same level. They're both the human characters who are just doing that. And he's just like,
he doesn't want to get in the middle of everything. So at that point, Superman interrupts and says that there's like a big Justice League-y kind of level thing going on, and that might potentially involve a thing, but they also mentioned that elsewhere, other Justice League members might get sent to a thing related to Cadmus, but they don't really say what it's gonna be.
No, Superman just comes and he's just like, oh, there's a fire here, and Batman's like, I also wanted to check something out there, and then Zatara...
Zatara says,
No, he's like, I forget, something blocking out the sun.
Yeah, there's a really big thing we need to do right now.
Yeah, and they're like, well, that's a fire. They have it mostly under control.
So I'm sure it'll be just a normal fire. But then the rest of them are like, well, clearly we should at least be doing something. Like, if we can't help with if you won't let us help with the blackout thing, at least let us do,
They don't admit it, that they just, before they get there, and it's just a really good moment, is where they're just like, okay, now we're annoyed. Like, Speedy, it's kind of good. It's bad on Speedy's part, where he just immediately had a problem and stormed off, where they're like, they sat through it, they tried to be civilized, but now they're like, no, we can't do this anymore. We aren't being sidekicks. We are treating like children, which is the point. But they took a small step, and they're just like, this is how we do it.
The important thing also is the wording that Batman specifically uses in that episode when they're saying, like, but we are superheroes, we are, Robin's one that specifically says we are trained, and if any of them are trained, it's Robin. Like, you would imagine, like, if your mentor is Batman, I don't bet you get breaks very often, like, from that perspective. But his specific line, he never says you're not trained, and he never says you're not experienced, or you're not worthy. He specifically says you are not trained as members of this team.
Yes, this is a league mission. Like
we're not just a bunch of random, punch fisty kind of people. Like, there's a level of coordination that goes into, like, even in, like, the original, like, when you got into, like, the Justice League Unlimited show, when you had, like, hundreds of members of the Justice League, There, like, Martian Manhunter took the role, like, there was literally just a guy who his only job was to say, this is the mission, and this exact combination of heroes is the best to handle this thing. Like, this is a thing that the Justice League does. So when he says, like, you're not trained as members of this team, he's specifically saying that, like, you're not understanding of our teamwork. You're not just, it takes more than just superpowered people to go off and punch things. It takes, more.
And I don't know, it would have been a little better if you got a little more focus on that team, but you did need that to move on to the next important story part. But it's still there, it's still good, it's nothing problem, but I think that part could have been a little ironed out. Yeah. Just a tad. Like, there's no huge wrinkles. I need to get off this metaphor. There's no huge problems and issues with it. It just could have been a little smoother.
The other thing I liked about it is, like, it's a super subtle thing, was when it came to how they established how Batman set himself up as, like, the gravitas that the Justice League themselves carry in the scene is just when the Watchtower camera comes down, like, it's a common theme of the show whenever they do that, or whenever they boom tube, that it scans and it gives whatever their number is. And for any comic book fan, you would assume that by the time that we've got Justice League in space, we probably have a pretty decent number of Justice League members. Like, we were probably established that there's tons of them at that point. And they're supposedly, by the way that this thing speaks, you would think all, like, cataloged in this thing. So it'd immediately start with Batman 2. Like,
yeah.
Like, later in the show, you have people that are, like, in the numbers in the hundreds categorically. And, like, you just opening the show is Batman 02. Like, you're that far in
the thing is, we don't know any of that.
No, but
and just in this episode, all we know, and I don't think they go past, like, 9 or whatever. I think it was Tornado.
Tornado's the highest, which was only 16.
16?
Yeah, his was 16.
Okay, either way.
But you still get this idea of, like, you'd imagine, like, it's still, like, only, like, Superman is probably, you assume, is, like, the number one number.
1 and 2.
And Batman is, like, 2. The guy who's right in front of you, the guy that you just, tried to outman up against and then ran off, is 2. Like,
and right before they go, Red Tornado stops, looks back for a second, and looks back. Which you wouldn't notice if you didn't know about the things. Because that's probably important.
On top of that, it makes the audience notice the idea that, like, obviously, like, Green Arrow and Aquaman and, like, those other people, that all of a sudden you're like, the fact that he paused there a second, it makes you wonder, like, wait a minute, who's this guy? Like, if you didn't know who Red Tornado was, it makes you notice that he's there to be like, this isn't a normal, like, if this guy's not a normal member of the Justice League, this guy might be important later. Like, there must be a reason why. Not only is he there in the group that we're in the show establishing as, like, the normal Justice League, what we know so far, and then this other guy. And it makes you notice, like, there must be something up with this other guy that,
he adds nothing to the dialogue. That's the only thing he does besides stand in the background, really. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, and I completely went by it the first time I watched it. I didn't notice it. I didn't really notice that scene until the second watch through, when I'm like, oh, hey, that's relevant later. I was like, oh, very cool. Anyway.
So the second the Justice League goes away, Robin is the first one to kind of jump on the bandwagon of trying to trick the others into be like, hey, well, if we took care of this thing before the Justice League takes care of it, then we'll be like the real heroes. And, like, everyone else kind of gives this impression of, like, we know what you're doing, but we don't necessarily disagree with you either. Like, Robin's not doing it for the best intentions. He's not doing it to save anybody. He's doing it for himself. And everyone knows he's doing it for himself. But at the same point, everyone else kind of acknowledges what they've been seeing before. Like, yeah, they are being treated like children. And if they can pull something like this off, then maybe all that'll change. And, like, hey, if we happen to save a couple of lives along the way, I mean, that's good, too.
It's just a fire. What's the worst that could happen?
What's the worst that could happen?
Don't say that, but yeah. And then they go there, and they immediately start going, and they start establishing clearly what's going on. There's a fire. First thing that happens, well, Kid Flash runs ahead, and the other two
Aqualad is like, oh, geez, we gotta stay together as we have to work together as a team, and Robin is already way ahead.
And it cuts to, well, you know, Robin doing the Batman thing, and just poof. And he's just like, ugh. Yes. And then he goes and saves the people.
Aqualad is the one that actually, like, does the thing he's supposed to do. It's like, everyone else is like, we know you had it.
He's like, you're good. He gets in there, and he's like, thanks for the help, guys. Not like in a serious way, and they're like, you got this, you handled this. Already just doing things like.
Once again, we're already
clearly establishing why the Justice League. This is exactly why they're doing. This is why they aren't as a team. They can't even work together with these three people. They're clearly not going to work together with however many of the
Justice League are currently have to work with.
We only know like 7 at the moment.
Yes. You know, it continues to cement in that idea of who these characters are. And especially establishes a very likable, or at least a very understandable Robin. Robin is a character that a lot of people really screw up. And it's a simple mechanic to understand. It's the idea of having a character that has, like, all the experience and power of Batman, but none of the responsibility or the maturity to know what to do with it. And you can have a lot of fun with that, and the series does have fun with that. So they immediately go in there, they start hacking through things and looking for things. But as Aqualad is looking around, he happens to notice what looks like an alien-like figure dropping down into a mysterious elevator. Because, you know, what could possibly go wrong? So, what I like about this is that they're still... They're starting to get a little... Once they understand that there's something that more than just a fire going on, they are acting a little bit more mature about things. They're not jumping right down the elevator shaft. You know, Robin is, you know, he's scanning the elevator and he realizes that it's not the kind of elevator that you'd find in a normal rickety 2-story building. So sure enough, they open it and there's like 20, 30 floors down and they realize, oh, well, there must be something going on here. Still don't want to call the Justice League yet because they want to, you know.
Yes, but they bring it up. They actually like, ooh, something's going on here. Maybe you should contact the League. And they're like, well, we don't really know what's going on. Let's go find out. We got to get more. This isn't going to be good
like
enough.
If we call the Justice League and there's nothing going on, then we're going to look even worse.
Yeah.
So, like, let's at least, you know, we're doing reconnaissance, right? You know, reconnaissance, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's really fun to see the way that these guys, like, justify their actions as they go. It's really fun. So they continue down the shaft. Robin makes a bad rope pun. And
yes.
I'm at the end of my rope. But they get to the floor they're at, and we start to see bits and pieces of what is going on down here. And this episode establishes something the show has to do a lot throughout the whole show that they do a really good job of, is dropping ourselves into worlds we know nothing about, have completely separate rules in our own, and rather than like sitting there and explaining what all the rules are, we kind of just get it. We see aliens walking around. One of them turns towards Aqualad, a red thing beams up, and all of a sudden he goes, everything is fine, there's nothing to worry about. And then immediately both of them snap back into normal. So immediately we've established that it's all scientific-y down here, there's aliens, and there's some form of mind control going on. And that's all we need to know so far. But we know it.
And it's clear that the red glowing horns is the cause. It gives you exactly enough details and moves on. And then we get to
this evil scientist-y kind of guy down in the...
What's the guy? The Guardian enters and is like a character I've never heard of.
Neither have I.
And actually made me look up who this character was and found out a little about him, which is exactly pros to
what you want to do.
Which is what the show should do. I was like, oh, that's cool. Here's a character I didn't know about, and now I know a little bit more. Anyway, he just goes to, and he's just like, oh, yeah, there's a little problem. They found a thing, and he's just like that. And he's like, we should just go. And it clearly just shows, oh, he's also being mind controlled by this.
Yes, there's the thing that I find interesting about it is that when you see this scene involved, you know that the alien is involved in mind control. And you see a human scientist and an alien scientist. And every television cliche you know, it leads you to believe that it is the alien scientist who's in charge of everything, and the human is being mind controlled everything. But in fact, it's the human scientist who's actually running everything. And when at risk of the alien being destroyed, the scientist alien suggests that he leave his little mind control buddy behind, but instead he uses the mind control, the Forest Guardian, to say, I must keep my mind controlling alien around with me at all times. I will now go about my missions.
And so they get in there and they found out they're not aliens. They're genetic mutants that they're building an army for, because of course they are.
Because comic books, but yes.
Yeah. So, so they're doing that. There's this bigger mysterious project that there's doing that they don't gain much information. And the Guardian comes up and he's just like, it's just you guys, the sidekicks. Oh, well, this is clearly just a misunderstanding. Like an adult, a really good person. We just need to contact the League. And they're like, no, we can't do this. And then
they immediately address the fact that, like, are you involved in all this stuff going on? Like, all these weapons? It's like, wait, weapons? Like, I didn't know anything about weapons.
And then immediately he turns and he mind controlled and he's like, nope, gotta kill these guys. Just like, he was clearly just a good guy. Who clearly, and they even managed, like, oh, you're a superhero. He's just like, no, I try, I'm not just a security guard here.
Because in the comics, he's kind of like a Captain America kind of like street level, like big tough guy without any powers kind of dude. But he does do a good job on the show of like, with like I said, how they have to establish this scene. And you notice very quickly when they are like on the run and they're kind of fighting all these guys, they're fighting very independently, as they would at this point. Like they're Robin kind of uses the smoke screen to get away, but it takes everyone else a little bit of time to back up because they don't know he's going to do that. They're not planning anything, so they just start running, and you hear the scientists say they're running for Project KR, which we don't know what that is yet. We just saw Robin, we saw the group looking at it on one of the computers, and we know that, like, ooh, this Project KR, this must be some important plot thing that we're going to get to. They run down to the end of the hallway. We realize that there's more than one, human person working down in these labs. We don't know if they're mind-controlled or not, but there's more than one. And they break into the Project KR vault area, and they lock themselves in. And Robin's like, haha, I shut off the... This is like a really good example of them not communicating. Is Robin goes, haha, I shut off the door. Now no one can get in. You mean we're trapped in here?
Yeah. There's one small moment before that where they're in the elevator and they're going down, and it's like, we're going down. We should be getting out of here. Aqualad's like, we need to get out of here and contact the League. Bring it up again. And he's like, no, but the project that we don't know what it is. Robin's like, no, I'm already headed down. This is like
we have to know. We should know what the project is, and then we leave.
He's like, it's just, we already know there's an army and they're building weapons. And like, they don't really know. They just know. Anyway.
Yeah, but they want to get more information. Like, we're so close to...
And he's like, we're already here. And he's like... And then they go and they're locked themselves in. That moment
and them locking themselves in, like I said, is an example of how they're not communicating. They're not working together as a team. They're just... Three guys happen to all be, at the same place or whatever. So they get into the Project KR thing. And they look up and they see what looks like, a younger version of Superman in this... cryogenic tube thing. And like, oh no, what is this? And he's wearing but instead he's wearing a shining white outfit, still with a red S on it. And Robin goes ahead and hacks the thing, and he realizes that it is a project codenamed Superboy, which was built from stolen Kryptonian DNA from Superman. And that the genome things in the front, which they finally figured out what they are now, because they found the right computer, are implanting educational information into him. So we know, he's a clone. We know, like, he's been kind of gestated in here, and he's built like that. But we assume, because we don't get any hints of anything yet, that he actually has some form of education, because they're putting information into him. Which, from their perspective... as a rationale of why they try to reason with him, because they see that he does in fact have, they think he's, at least from their perspective, that he might actually be able to be reasoned with. So they shut down the tube, and Superboy breaks out, and he kind of just stands there, and he stares, and in a blink of an eye, just tackles Aquaman right to the floor. Like, it's literally like it is a super speed effect. Like, that is the actual speed he's rushing at him, and immediately just like 4 punches right to the face, while the others are trying to peel him off and trying to do anything. But keep in mind, I mean, you find out later he's not quite as strong as Superman is, but
he's still
with no conscience holding him back. This is not an opponent they can take down very easily.
Yes, and they do the fight scene really well, where it's Robin like back there throwing things, Flash is just getting back in. It's mostly versus him and Aqualad,
because Aqualad's the only one with enough like pure physical strength to like actually put a dent in him.
He would just smear Robin, and Flash could take a hit or two because they're more speedsters are more durable.
Yes.
But he's still, as far as we know, he's still Superman. All we know is that
he has some form of Kryptonian level strength.
Yes. For all we know, he's basically young Superman. That's all we know.
Yeah.
So he just comes out, he just beats him. Aqualad gets in a bunch of really good hits. He's he's more experienced. He's a better fighter.
Plus, he has he actually has like Atlantean technologies things.
Yeah, and they never explain. All they know is that he can use water and he uses electricity.
Yes.
But which hurts him, and he goes up and he's just stronger. And he just has pure strength at this point and just smashes him against the ceiling a couple times, and all three are down. First episode, all three main characters really. That's where you end. And he goes up, he throws the door open like nothing, just boom, giant vault door, and just stands there, perfectly blank slate, no emotion, as little Xenomorph sits on the side with the red horns.
Absolutely.
And that's where they end.
That is how we end our pilot, is our heroes just demolished deep underground where no one knows where they are, fighting against an army of genetic mutants and some sort of brainwashed kid Superman.
I never.
And you just finish it, and just the first thing in your mind is just can't watch that second episode soon enough. It's just.
I remember watching this, and I thought that was a commercial break.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's the first episode. It went, for me, watching the first time, it went by really quick, and it didn't seem like 22 minutes. It seemed like the first half of an episode.
Yeah.
And it really is. And the pilot does a little bit more, because this is just your pilot, and it feels like the first part is kind of a 2-part episode that's clearly established, and this is clearly a halfway point, which, essentially is. But they'll work into a theme later.
Mm-hmm.
But this is clearly how they did it. Here's our characters. They're strong, they're good, but they're not undefeatable, and they just got their ass beat after a good fight scene.
Oh, absolutely. Like, the thing, I want to mention a little bit about this, because it does match up with the fight scene as well, is one of my favorite things I like with the series is I love Aquaman's weapon. Like, it's just something really unique to his character that I really like. Just, like, he has Aqualad's weapon.
Sorry.
We're going to make that mistake a lot in this thing.
You're going to make that mistake a lot.
So Aqualad's weapon, rather than doing Aquaman's trident or anything like that, what they did is he's already, you can tell he's kind of wearing some form of, like, Atlantean-themed armor, but also he has kind of these, he has, a pack-ish of water that he carries with him that kind of runs through tubes inside of the thing, and he has, outlets for them on either one of his wrists, which he uses in multiple forms. He either can use them to take control of other water and kind of manipulate it. He can run electricity through it. And he also, in somewhat of like a Green Lantern-ish kind of way, can actually solidify it to a degree that it's hard enough to actually, do damage to things. And you don't really get a sense of exactly, to what level that works. And I don't know if it's technically magically powered or anything like that. But without any of that established, you still get the sense that when he takes, a mace of this stuff, and at full sprint just bashes it across the side of Superboy's head, you get the sense that hurt.
Yeah.
Like, it's the first time they, like, legitimately did damage to him during that end fight scene, is when we get this moment where, like, Aqualad's like, I am not holding back anymore.
Yeah. And you see him use that exact same thing earlier to hit Frost villain. I forget which one
Killer
they
Frost,
did. Yeah,
yeah.
Killer Frost. I forget which Frost villain it was. But anyway, yeah, it does it, and it knocks her out one hit. And this is Superman, but it does damage. Clearly not enough.
Absolutely.
It does a good job that clearly establishing not who really, again, this is the main character we understand the least of, really.
Mm-hmm.
Who his powers are the most clearly defined. I mean, you don't really hugely need to find the power because Flash is just Flash. He's a speedster. His powers, we don't know the full extent, but his powers and Robin's young Batman. It clearly establishes his powers, and it doesn't explain the Atlantean technology. You see him use it like 3 times. One, he uses it to ride up and then bring people down, so he has some form of control and the electricity in the fight. Clearly establishes it. It never explains it. Again, we'll deal with this a lot more, and we'll keep coming back to this. This is what the show does.
Absolutely.
It draws you in. Here's what you want. Here's what you need. And, now you're done, by the way. So anyway, as a pilot episode, it works really well. It feels off, like, as it cut off and suddenly, like, now this is a cliffhanger, and it's a really cliffhanger, which is mildly annoying for a pilot. Mm-hmm. I prefer my pilots a little more enclosed.
Contained, yeah.
But this works. Oh, no, it still works.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the pilot episode still suffers, as almost all pilots do, as a pilot. It suffers a small bit, but here, there, minor nitpicks. Anyway, we'll pick up next time.
Absolutely. So kind of how I want to wrap each of these up, looking at this as a full, like, series kind of thing, is to kind of wrap these things up. I want to end up each of us to hit on 3 quick points. I want to hit on what our thoughts on the episode are. I want to talk about, like, what really good things we learned this episode, and, like, big questions we leave the show with. To show, like, so I want to show as we go, like, how it manages that pacing as an overall show. Okay. So I'd say, pilot-wise, I really like this show because it, like we talked about, establishes exactly who these characters are, and I like that it establishes what our stakes are, what our personalities are, what level of everything we're dealing with. And that's what we learn in this episode, is we learn, plot-wise, we learn that, Cadmus is our big thing. We learn that there's something, that there's some sort of genetic thing that they're all dealing with down there, but we still have to learn who is this Superboy, what exactly is going on with him, and we still have yet to learn what the motivation or the plan behind any of this Cadmus stuff is.
Okay. Well, we just started talking about the whole episode, and it was really good. Pilots. We want more. Really more. The thing is, it's good, it's fine, but we really want more, and there's minor issues. What we learned? Well, we learned everything about the show. It's a pilot. We didn't...
Absolutely. I mean, the mentality of that will make more sense when we're dealing with more, like, cliffhanger stuff later on.
I know, but I had to do that.
I understand.
We don't know anything about the show, and there's so many questions. It leaves you with just enough questions, but the big questions are, well, obviously, how are they going to get out of this situation? They're kind of completely screwed.
Absolutely. Like, there's no real, like...
This ends on, like, if this wasn't a kid's show, like, I could totally see them dying and just being like, that's a thing. But obviously, that's not going to happen. Obviously, how are they going to ally? Because they're the main characters. Yeah, I see. What do we know? That's the big cliffhanger. Like,
yeah,
we don't know Cadmus is gonna be a bigger thing. It seems like they right now, just at this episode, they seem just like generic villain of the week.
Yes,
building an army. That's all what we know about them. Mm-hmm. Just this episode is just thinking about this episode is just, I don't know, how are they gonna get out of this? And let's find out next time.
Next time on... No. But yeah, that's the big thing about this pilot, is that it answers just enough questions, and it asks just enough more to get you through to want to see the epic conclusion. Like, it is literally the definition of the, you're like, will our heroes get through the, so tune in next time to, like, it is like the ultimate setup of, like, how will our heroes get out of this one kind of climax, and that's what I really like about it.
But better than other shows who did this, it doesn't do what is going to happen next time. It just ends on a shot of them down, him stone-faced, mind-controlled. Oh, and by the way, here's the credits. Just the credits happen just like... But it's a small thing, but it comes really cool later where the credits happen just snap and credits. You're like, wait, what? Oh, it's over? Oh, crap. Now I...
Like, the credits feel like the mic drop of, like, a dramatic show. It's just like... Oh, you thought we were going to solve this episode? Nope. We watched this all on Netflix when we first watched it. Like, I could not imagine watching this serialized. That'd be ridiculous.
It would literally drive me crazy. Anyway.
We hope that wraps up what makes Young Justice, that establishes the pilot of this, but also, like, one of the better pilots I've seen. Like, whenever someone asks me, like, what is, like, an example of, like, a really solid pilot, like, a really good first episode that just does everything it needs to do, and this is the top of my list.
Yeah, it's not the top of my list. It's up there, but it's not, like, my number 3 or whatever. But, yeah, it's a really good, solid pilot. It clearly establishes the show. Anyway, minor nitpicks, but we'll deal with that a little bit more because it's kind of hard to talk about this since this kind of is intended. It's
intended as a two-parter, but there is enough information. It feel disingenuous to kind of throw it all together.
But as we're doing this one episode per thing. So
we hope that all of you kind of follow along with us, and we hope this. If every person we get to watch this amazing show is a victory in my book. So we hope that you're watching with us. We hope you're watching along. And we look very much forward to talking about episode 2 with you. Because what could possibly go wrong?
We'll find out.
On episode 2. Good night.